I had a hobby too. Mine happened to be guns and ballistics, and I studied guns and ballistics as much as I could, and I wrote an article about high velocity.
So out of all my years working at Weatherby, the last 5 have been some of the most exciting. Working with Adam, with him running the company.
And to think that I get the opportunity of carrying on my grandfather's legacy 75 years later here in Sheridan, Wyoming, I mean, it really is a dream come true.
Oh, I'm home. Thank God I'm home.
On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Weatherby Podcast On Our Mark. We're here in Sheridan, Wyoming, beginning of August, and this is Kevin Wilkerson.
And I'm Luke Torkelson, Vice President of Sales Marketing, Product Development, and we've got a couple guests on our podcast today. We've got John Solberg, our inside sales guru here, and then we're especially honored to have Thor Tingey on the phone with us, joining us from Mancos, Colorado, of Alpacka Rafts. Hey, Thor.
Hey, how's it going?
Fantastic.
Thanks for joining the podcast today. And you know, for just to kind of jump right into it, it had always been a dream of mine to go hunt caribou. And here everybody at Weatherby's kind of DIY-ish.
Hold on, before we just jump into it,
Okay,
I feel
all
like
right.
we got to do like a really, really big view right off the bat, which we're going to talk about a pretty epic caribou hunt that we just did last week.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
And we got to say that right off the gate. So
Sure.
now go.
Oh, okay, that was the intro. Okay. So
Just the context. We got
the context is about an epic caribou trip that has been done before by people and then repeated by us.
Yeah.
But we were very happy with our successes during the trip. And I know John has a lot of questions and thoughts about it. John's a big hunter himself, and so we wanted John to come in here too, because I know that he had questions, and we kind of made everybody in the office wait until we did this episode.
Yeah, I don't
So-
think I've given you some tidbits, but not the
I've got
whole
to
rundown.
I've got to hear some things from you guys before, but I haven't got to hear the details, so it'll be good to hear it
Yeah.
firsthand.
So I'm gonna fast forward a little bit, and that's like months of research that I did, and a lot of that goes to like calling people that have done it. And so I did a lot of research. I listened to some podcasts about the 5 mile mark. Obviously, we work at Weatherby, so we're looking to shoot these caribou with rifles. And the biggest thing I saw was covering the tussocks to get to the 5 mile mark to shoot caribou. And then also the migration over the Dalton Highway / Hall Road, whichever one you want to call it, and all of that intermixed into the overall experience. So I want to say I talked to like 7 to 8 people,
Okay.
and everyone told me not to do it.
Except one.
Except for one, and that person's on our podcast right now.
He's on the phone with us.
And he's on the phone with us.
And why did they tell you not to do it? What was the main reason?
So Kevin mentioned the tussocks, and it's got different names: muskeg, tussocks. It's the Tundra, and it's almost indescribable how weird it is to walk on. I've heard different attempts on how to describe like a swimming pool full of half-inflated volleyballs.
And just for reference sake, we need to give a shout out to Abe Henderson, which is Alaskan DIY.
Yeah.
That's who gave us that
Shout out.
little tidbit on what that feels like. And I think, and Thor, you could actually speak to this too, because I think you've walked on more than we have. But like, I even noticed that it was different depending on where we were in the tundra. So
Yeah.
like if we were closer to the river or if we were up on top of one of the hills, like it felt different.
Oh yeah. Tundra is, I'll call it, it's part science, part art, but there is definitely technique
No
to
doubt.
travel over tundra. And I have hiked across hundreds of, probably thousands of miles of Alaska's backcountry. And I know people that have done a lot more than me. And it's kind of amazing how, if you go with somebody that really knows what they're doing, just how much more efficient they can be.
Mhm.
But there's definitely some tricks. You guys probably discovered that bright green is no bueno. Like, you do not want to be in the bright green.
Sure.
You want to be
Yep.
in the darker colors.
Yep.
You kind of want to get up high, and the river bottoms are money.
Yeah. You're walking
That's
on
where
those
you can
rocks.
really move.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's where the animals move too. You'll find bear trails, moose trails, caribou trail. Caribou don't make quite the trails that bear, moose, and wolf do. And actually, one of kind of the guys that I've learned the most from. He calls all those trails up there BMW trails for bear, moose, wolf trails.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, so it's all about the path of least resistance is what it sounds like.
It is.
But once you figure out kind of where those trails are, you can actually move pretty well through tundra, but it's still, there's, it's daunting going 5+ miles just as the crow flies there. That'll wear you out.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So John, you're walking through this tussocks, and there's just lumps. There's I don't know. It's this plant. It's called muskeg, whatever. It's about the size of a volleyball. And one time you step on it, you're going to just roll off like you would expect. The next time you'd fall off to the side. And sometimes the strategy is to walk on top of the thing, and sometimes it's to walk next to it. But everything is just squishy. It's super strange.
So you're
stuff.
constantly off balance is what it sounds like.
Yeah, and it's almost better. I found my strategy was not so much to like try to just power through, but to try to just glide and roll with the deflections. Like
go with the flow.
Take kind of short steps, and maybe you don't extend your leg all the way like you normally would when you're hiking. You just kind of let it ride.
So that might be part of the reason why you guys were saying that you can't chase caribou.
Yeah, one of the another large piece of advice that literally everybody told us, including Thor, I think you told us too, but was just like, don't chase caribou. And you're, coming from an elk hunter or like a mule deer or an antelope hunter, you're like, I'm going to go chase that animal.
I'm going to get that.
I'm going to get that dude.
Right.
But when you are sitting on top of a hill and you see them coming and you're watching them, you're like, whoa.
Well, and first of all, out
They're
there,
covering ground.
The country is so big, you can glass. We were spotting caribou many miles
Had
away.
to have been miles away. Easily.
Way past what my rangefinder could do. I can go to about a mile with my rangefinder, and it was ridges beyond that.
But they're constantly on the move.
Yes.
Right. And is it because of the bugs, or is it just that's the way that they behave?
Well,
I don't
that's
know.
another theory. Stuart, do you have any insight on the bug thing?
On bugs or caribou?
What makes them move? What
On
makes
caribou
move?
movement compared to the bugs, or like their relationship?
Yeah, I haven't really thought real hard about that. They do not like bugs, that's for sure, but they have to live with them.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of tough in that early season because it sounds like you guys got in some bugs. The last 3 trips I've had in the Arctic after August 1st, I really haven't been that buggy.
Yeah.
But some years it's super buggy. But definitely early in the season, they are. You'll find caribou either up high out of the bugs, or sometimes I know they like to calve down on the coastal plain.
Sure.
So I'm not sure what I think that's pretty nasty buggy, and they just deal with it. But
we're jumping around a little bit there to introduce the story, but just when we talk about bugs, I had a really random, very nightmarish mosquito thing happen to me on the coast of off the coast of Miami years ago, and so that will forever be burned into my mind as like a horror movie. But this is a close second. Like, there were moments, Luke, you can confirm, and they liked me for some reason, but you would look at me and I'd have hundreds on me at one time.
It didn't seem to matter what we thought it was a color thing at first. He was wearing a First Light gray hoodie, and when he'd have that on top of his head would just be. It's probably safe to say there's hundreds of mosquitoes just sitting on his head.
They wouldn't move. They were just sitting
They
there.
would land there. And then he changed to a different, like a tan color, and they were still there. I was wearing the tan color, and it was like...
Yeah, one time we were playing cards.
I don't know.
I was the only one with mosquitoes on me.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
They like... I don't know if it's your detergent. I don't know what it is, but they liked Kev. There's
For
no
some
doubt.
reason.
Anyways.
that definitely happens to me. I've got that same thing. They love me.
So me and you need to go.
My wife's like, there's no bugs. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm getting destroyed over here.
Yeah. Send Kevin one direction. He'll take all the bugs with him.
That's what we got to figure out. So we digress.
Okay, so we need to back this train up a little
Yes.
bit and start from the beginning. So, Kevin, you're doing some crazy research, trying to figure out how to pull this hunt off. And you saw an article?
I saw an article that featured some shout-outs here. Some folks from Maven Optics.
Shout out.
Obviously, Thor was in it.
Shout out.
For Alpacka Rafts. And Thor, I don't remember, Joe.
Shout out.
Reese?
Joe Reese was on it, right, Thor?
Yeah, Joe. So it was Craig from Maven Optics, and then
Shout
Joe
out.
Reese, who works for Backbone Media in
Shout out.
PR, and then Mating Puelas, who does Hunt to Eat,
Giannis's
which is,
brother. Yeah.
Shout out.
Closer. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So the four of us went in there. Joe had talked to me about wanting to do this caribou hunt, and I had never done the off the Dalton Highway thing, and I was like, you know what, we could totally do a pack raft hunt there, and we can get outside the 5 mile zone. We're gonna get away from people. We're gonna find caribou, I hope. If not, we're just gonna have an awesome adventure, and then if we get caribou, we're gonna be able to float back to the car, and we're gonna be stoked.
Yeah. Okay. So that like a perfect example. That's pretty much what Thor told me when I called him.
Yeah.
Kind of cold called you, Thor, and was just like, "Hey, my name's Kevin. I work at Weatherby, and we want to do this." And you were super nice and told us. I actually looked at our email thread the other day. We have 64 emails back and forth, and most of those are just questions. Most of those are questions from me to you. So like, it's not like two-way. It's just like one-way questions.
But Thor answered them, and I remember Kevin and I would have a meeting, like trying to figure out, can we pull this off? Can we do this? And we'd come up with some questions. How are the bugs? What shoes do you wear?
Can we
blah,
catch
blah,
fish?
Blah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we'd send, 3 questions at a time?
Yeah, a lot of questions.
But then Kevin would come back with this email answers, and they weren't just like, yes, no. It was like, you could catch fish, except for when I was there, the river was up really high. And I mean, it was just like
incredibly
on and on
detailed.
and on.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's like, so thanks so much for giving us some solid tips. So we basically went in trying to recreate
that trip. Yeah, and Thor, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys went in with 2 caribou, 2 hunters and 2 people.
2 hunters. Yep.
2 hunters and 2 people enjoying the ride, which you were enjoying the ride.
Yep. I decided last minute not to get a tag. I slightly regret it, but not really. We got 2 caribou. I got plenty of meat. I was stoked. It was an awesome hunt, but I definitely would go back to shoot one myself.
Yeah, which we probably need to make happen in the future. It sounds like me and you are mosquito buddies, so we can see which one they like the most. But saying that though is kind of what you said. That was the first year you did the Dalton Highway, and this was the first year. Last week was the first time we'd ever done it, and look, like we left thinking we have to come do this again.
No question. It was like first annual. It wasn't. It started off as once in a lifetime, and it turned into first annual really quick.
Got to figure it out. You got to figure out how to do it.
And that's because it's doable. That's why you guys think you can do it.
Yeah.
I really do. Yeah.
Yes. Now that we need to say doable with an asterisk.
Yes.
Because
we had some help. We had
a lot of information, and also I think you have to be prepared, just like any other backcountry hunt.
Yeah.
It ain't no walk in the park.
No.
For sure. Thor, were you going to say something?
For sure. There's an adventure experience component to it. I mean, I think you guys probably had the same thing. Like, we didn't shoot the biggest bulls you could shoot on our trip.
Yeah.
But we had an amazing time and such a cool adventure, and we didn't see a person.
Yeah, same.
I've tried to steer away over the years of criticizing other people's experience, because what other people want to do is up to them to some degree.
Yeah.
But like, if you look at there was recently an article, I think in the Fairbanks Daily News Miner, about the resident registration 40-mile hunt up off the Steese Highway.
Yes.
And there's an aerial photo of thousands of cars lined up.
We talked to some Fairbanks residents about that. They said it was super dangerous.
Yes, we went to Sportsman's warehouse there in town to burn some time. Our bag got lost, and they were telling us about that 40-mile the thing, and they were like, they were trying to get us to go on it, and then they were like, yeah, but if you go, you got to bring orange. Definitely wear orange, and you'll have bullets fly over your head. And we're like, what?
Yeah, and I'm sure hunters on there killed plenty bigger bulls than any of us did, but the experience of going up there and getting away from people from a few days and just getting out there, and that's what I live for.
Yeah. That's the same way.
So there's a couple things that to me made this trip an absolute adventure. First of all, it was my first trip to Alaska, which was awesome. And so we flew into Fairbanks, and then we headed up the Hall Road, or the Dalton Highway.
Rented a car.
We rented a car, and it was it's a long ways up there.
Dirt road.
Mostly dirt. There are some paved sections, but it's It's mostly dirt.
And the rules are you can't hunt on a certain boundary off of the road.
Yeah, you have to get Thor. I don't know if you know, but I think you have to get well past what's called
the 5 mile mark.
Cold foot Alaska is really where you start hunting caribou, which is in the Brooks Range, and then it drops down to what's called the North Slope. So from Cold Foot all the way to Dead Horse / Prudhoe Bay, which is the Arctic Ocean, that's your 5 mile corridor, is what I think that they would call it.
Yeah, so you got to get as
and
go ahead, Thor.
it's actually the entire Dalton Highway, but the main hunting zone is all that north side.
Okay, yeah.
You're still talking, 250 miles of road? I mean, there's a lot of country up there.
I think it's more than that.
I think it's
I don't know.
From Cold Foot north.
From
Cold
Cold
Foot north.
yeah.
Yeah, it's roughly 250 miles up to the Arctic Ocean and Prudhoe Bay.
A long drive.
Dude, it's a long drive. There's no, and we're talking bumpy drive. We're talking, it's pretty humorous. It depends on your attitude, though. Like, I know a lot of people that don't want to drive like that, and so they want to go get a flight, and they want to get dropped somewhere, and that's cool. But, like, me and Luke love driving, and we don't mind it, so, like, it's all good.
We saw some amazing, just driving through the Brooks Range. I just blanked. What's the pass?
Adigan
Pass, thanks. Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah,
go ahead, Thor.
The mountains from Cold Foot all the way up over the pass they're mind-boggling.
They are.
They're so cool.
And you guys saw wildlife the whole way.
We didn't actually. So
it got your.
It kind of driving.
It was a downer. It was a downer on the way in.
Yeah, we should probably do a quicker play-by-play. So we flew into Fairbanks.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys with us on our trip, we had 4 people. Mac is our photo video guy for Weatherby. One of his bags didn't show up. Everybody else's did, and his other bag showed up, but it got stuck in Seattle. So all of a sudden, we got 6 hours to kill. So we go to the Sportsman's Warehouse in Fairbanks. We go to a bunch of places, but we go to Sportsman's Warehouse. We recently did this meat eater rifle there. It's exclusive at Sportsman's Warehouse on Weatherby.com. And wanted to talk to the counter guys. The Fairbanks store is actually the #1 store in the Sportsman's Warehouse chain of stores for that rifle. So I wanted to talk to the counter guys and just be like, what are you guys doing? How are you selling so many? What's going on? So we do that. We talk to them, and they start asking us questions like, what are you guys doing here? And so we tell them what we're planning to do. And shout out to Sportsman's Warehouse, James, because he's like, I got this buddy Hook with Dead Horse Outfitters that runs an airboat.
Who's living on the side of the Dalton Highway.
Yeah. At the time, it meant nothing to us, but he's like, just past Pump Station 2, you'll find Hook on the side of the road.
That's exactly how it went down. And I'm like, well, on my mapping, I've never seen anything about pump stations, so I don't know what he's talking about. So at that moment, so our plan was to pack everything up river systems.
Mm-hmm.
And this information came from Thor.
Mm-hmm.
So we're
going to protect the names of some rivers. If people really care
you can find
enough to find out, you can do some research, but check it out.
We were going to park a truck, go up, backpack up a river, hunt, get to that 5 mile mark, which looked like it was going to be more like 8 miles of walking to get to the 5 mile mark. And then once we shoot caribou, use our Alpacka Rafts, which we just real quick, we brought in a mule. Another mule, and then a caribou raft. That's right, Thor?
Yep, that's it. 3 mules and a caribou.
Yep.
Yes. And so it was perfect. The caribou, correct me if I'm wrong, Thor, but the caribou is a little bit smaller than the mule.
Yeah, it's a smaller, lighter boat. We built it for really for bike rafting. You know, people ride fat bikes and then they get to rivers and they float
That's
out
awesome.
with the bike on the front. That's what that kind of front's for. But it's actually become fairly aptly named because there are a few hunters that have adopted that boat because it's a fair bit lighter.
Yeah.
You're space constricted, whereas you guys probably found the mules are pretty nice for packing out an animal.
I was blown away at how much stuff we fit on and in those rafts. That airtight zipper where you stick the gear inside the air chambers, it was awesome.
It was a game changer.
Yeah.
I don't know who came up with me and Luke talked about this. I don't know who came up with waterproof, airproof zippers, but that's
pretty
awesome.
Good
tech right there.
It is.
That's pretty good tech. So our goal was to do just that. Backpack up, kill our animals, put them on the rafts, and come out. Our cameraman had the caribou because he could carry less stuff. He wasn't going to bring an animal out, and so we all three of the other guys had mules.
And so Kevin spent, he just said, weeks, months planning this deal. We had waypoints. We had everything figured out. We talked to James at Sportsman's Warehouse for 10 minutes, and all of a sudden we're like, oh gosh, what do we do? do we take a chance on airboat Captain Hook,
Pump Station 2? And so at that point I called the partner at Dead Horse Outfitters. His name is Jeremy. And he was able to answer the phone, and we talked. I asked quite a few questions because obviously my research, I had in my head what we were looking for as an experience. And so I wanted to make sure.
We didn't want a guided outfitted trip. That's not what we wanted.
Right, DIY.
We just wanted to get in
We
easier.
just thought if we could get to that 5 mile mark a little easier or a little further in, we would have maybe a more relaxing of a trip.
Yeah. Turns out we were right.
I love it when a plan comes together.
You're definitely right.
Yeah. So he tells us to go to Pump Station 2 and find his buddy Hook, who's living on the side of the road with an airboat.
And an inReach. That's it, because there's no cell service for the very vast majority of the haul road. Just nothing.
So we actually leave Fairbanks at 9 p.m. after we get the bag, and we decide to drive through the entire night.
We drove straight through.
Okay. And you guys haven't shot your rifles yet?
We did.
God, we should talk about this briefly. And this is no disrespect to the Fairbanks people because we love that place.
Yeah. If you are listening from Fairbanks, your range is crazy.
And they might laugh because they agreed. We went to this range, and it was me and Luke have been to a lot of ranges.
It's the Fairbanks Public Gun Range just outside of town.
It was something else.
Every surface that could be shot
was shot.
The benches, there was
the awnings.
The rifle range had a half of it had an awning over the top.
Bullet holes
all over the place.
It's Alaska,
dude. It was wild. The seats had bullet holes in them. A guy had a Browning 1919 fully automatic machine on a tripod.
Yeah, just
hammering.
Right next to a family that's trying to learn to shoot a revolver. Next to this dude that's shooting sighting in his brand new Vanguard Meat Eater. Next to a guy shooting like a 50 cal sniper rifle, bolt gun.
The whole assortment.
And he'd shoot like 2 or 3 shots, and then he'd pull out a Glock and just shoot the ground 4 feet in front of him. Just dump a mag.
Good practice.
We're like,
very good
what
practice.
Is happening?
Okay.
It's greatness.
Side note, Thor, did you have something to say to that?
You guys I'm like dying here laughing. I have not experienced this, but one of my best friends in my life he grew up in Fairbanks. I grew up in Denali Park, so Fairbanks was like the city when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And so, but one of my very best friends in the world, he grew up in Fairbanks. We lived together in Anchorage, worked at a mountaineering shop, and then he now is the superintendent of Northern Area State Parks for Alaska. And last year we were there, he and his brother were like hanging out, and we always are drinking, playing games, and having a good time, and just like BSing about everything. And they went on a full 30-minute discussion of the chaos of the Fairbanks.
This is great.
It's true. Whatever they said, it's worse than that.
That is hilarious because, I mean, obviously, we've been around guns in our industry for a long time. So we've been to a lot of ranges, and we drove up and we really didn't say anything for 15 minutes.
There was some awe going on.
We just watched.
First of all, the amount of people there was impressive.
I think there was 26 people shooting long guns.
Yes.
And a machine gun mixed in there.
We're right in front of go time, for getting your guns ready to roll, but
crushing it.
Just the use was impressive. So really cool that there's that many people there.
Nice, that's good.
So we're not dogging. I want to come back. We kind of are. We're kind of not.
I can't tell if I'm scared or jealous.
That's great.
I'm somewhere in the middle.
We're somewhere
in the middle of the freedom of that range, and whether or not we should want to be there or should we not want to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just be situationally aware.
we did take some time. We after flying, we took a couple shots with each of the 3 rifles that we brought. Verified, no issues. Got in and got out. All good.
So
I think the way it was described to me was, if you're somebody that cares about traditional rules of gun safety, that's probably not the range you should hang out at.
That's I could see why they would say that. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
So we had 6 hours to kill because one of Mac's bags didn't get there. So we went to Sportsman's warehouse. We got some last minute groceries that we didn't want to fly with, and
fuel for the jet boil.
Yeah, jet boil fuel, some other stuff.
Yeah. So then we drove through the night. We took shifts. We drove the whole way, which through the night we mean there's like an hour of twilight.
Yeah, it doesn't get full dark this time of year.
I think Thor. I think we got to Coldfoot. I want to say it was like 3:50 a.m.
Yep, that's about right.
And we almost passed. We did pass the exit, or did we not?
No, we didn't. Yeah.
And then Luke, you went in and actually had to get somebody to turn the pump on because there was nobody there.
First of all, the pump's from not the last 3 decades, but
No.
so you are like, oh gosh, you expect you're just going to swipe your credit card in this sucker, and nope, that's not going to happen. So there's no lights on, there's nothing, and we're like, man, we're going to have to sleep here till they come to life at whatever time that is, which is a bummer because we just drove through the night to get here. But I went inside and there's just a dude like in a chair, like, oh, you need gas? Yep. Just give me your card. So I gave him his card and we filled up and on we went. But
we were good to go.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting, and a side little note, we missed the pump station too.
Yeah, we were looking on the wrong side of the road.
Couldn't find anything.
Because we're looking for animals, which John, you said a few minutes ago, like, did y'all see wildlife? We saw three rabbits.
Oh.
The
we
whole
didn't see
way.
anything on the way
From
down.
Fairbanks to basically Pump Station 2. We saw 3 rabbits and a couple crows.
No caribou.
Very promising. Very promising so far.
I felt good about it. I felt good about it because Thor gave us some good intel. And because I had been the one that kind of been planning it. I was just like, the caribou are here. We just have to wait for them to walk by.
Knowing what I know now, they're working their way from the bay or the coastal portion by the Arctic Ocean south.
So it's about how they migrate.
It's how they migrate.
Yeah. Thor, what do you think about that experience?
Yeah, you're like seeing caribou in the highway corridor, even though it's a bow hunting corridor, is not super common. I think they kind of figure out that that's not the place for them to hang out.
Right.
Yeah.
They probably don't fare so well.
No, because you got to be 5 miles from the road to hunt with a rifle. But from what I understand, you can shoot right on or right off the road with a bow.
Oh.
And so we did see some some truck hunters that were just walking down, like kind of hunched down, like trying to put a stock on a couple caribou on our way out. But on our way in, we saw pretty much no caribou. And it was a little disconcerting, but
I've driven that road, I think 4 times, and I've seen caribou maybe 1 out of the 4 times. I always see musk ox, and I see moose about half the time in the Coldfoot area, but that's about it.
So we're cruising. We've realized we've missed Pump Station 2, and we're told that
which we don't know what that is.
We don't
actually.
fully.
We were just telling you.
We'd seen other pump stations, but we're like, I don't remember seeing.
Wait, and this is for Captain Hook. We're trying to find Captain Hook.
We're trying to
His name's
find
not
Hook.
Captain Hook.
We're trying to find
I don't want
Hook.
to call him Captain Hook.
I said Airboat Captain Hook, but he's an airboat captain or airboat
and his nickname
pilot.
is Hook. His actual name is Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we talked to Jeremy, it made it sound like it'd be very noticeable to see the Dead Horse Outfitters trailer right after Pump Station 2. It's all relative. I think there's some stuff we picked up in Alaska that it's different. So right after Pump Station 2 was not like a couple hundred yards. It was like several miles after Pump Station 2.
Yeah, it's fine. We still found it.
We did. We found it. And they were off the road, but they were a little further than what we had in our mind, being like, lower 48 dwellers.
Right off the road.
Yeah, right off the road. We're like, oh, it's just going to be right there. Anyway, we got out there. We find it.
He's there.
He's there.
Hook's there.
Hook's there.
And he's a cool dude.
He's awesome.
He's got a hook for a hand, just if we haven't talked about this.
Yeah.
He lost his hand, so he literally legitimately has a hook as his hand, which is another thing that might be very Alaskan. Thor, does that sound like things that happen there?
Not anything that I've personally met, but it doesn't surprise me that there's a guy named Hook with one hand living on the side of the Dalton Highway, taking people up rivers in airboats.
That's pretty cool.
And he was such a cool dude. He was such a nice guy. Like it
was awesome.
It was so cool.
But to this point, we don't know Hook. We just know James, who we met for 10 minutes in Sportsman's warehouse.
Who knows Hook.
Wow. And so we're like, oh, man, we're kind of going out on a limb here. And so we're still feeling a little like, have we made the right decision? Kevin planned this thing for months, and we just called an audible after a 10-minute conversation. So we pull up. We had in-reached Hook as we were traveling overnight, but for sometimes in-reach to in-reach can be a little sketchy. So he didn't actually get it till that morning, and we said, hey, we want to go out tomorrow. So we get there basically a few minutes after he got that in-reach message, thinking tomorrow was tomorrow, but for him tomorrow was today. So he thought he had another day. So he was in the middle of changing the pitch on his prop for the airboat because it was crazy windy that day. So he's like, hey, I need 3-4 hours. Why don't you go all the way up to Prudhoe Bay and kill a little bit of time and then come back and we'll take you out. But we picked his brain pretty heavy.
Yeah, we felt real good about it.
We left feeling really good. Talking to Hook, we're like, oh, this is the right decision. This is it.
The next couple hours we could pretty much sum up with the statement that we went to Dead Horse and / Prudhoe Bay, and then we could actually come directly back to the story because that's about as much as you want to know about that city.
Which I think we've verified, though, it's the furthest north you can drive in the world on an official highway, which was cool.
It's either that or Highway E69 in Europe. But what I believe is that Highway E69 is paved.
Yeah.
And it's not as far north. But the Dalton Highway is unpaved and it is further north.
So it was cool. Like, did that.
Off the
that was
bucket list.
awesome. So we drove the entirety of the Dalton Highway, which was awesome.
Really cool. Thor, did you guys end up going all the way up there?
Yeah, my wife and I went up there together in 2015, and we didn't intend to go to Dead Horse, but we had gone up there and we'd done a couple of just pack rafting trips off the highway and one where we actually got flown in, and we left our van on the side of the road up there. And then some friends who were doing a trip there as well, they had a vehicle on the side of the road. And when they got out, we had dropped their vehicle for them. They didn't know where it was, and they got in our vehicle and went looking for it and ended up driving 50 miles the wrong direction. So that when we got back to our car, we were like, hey, we have a lot less gas than we thought. We can't get back to Coldfoot. So we had to make the Dead Horse trip.
Oh, because you were closer to Dead Horse than you were.
Yeah, because once you leave Fairbanks, you can get gas in Coldfoot and Prudhoe Bay, and that's it.
Oh, so you better not miss it.
Yeah, we were only 50 miles from Dead Horse.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And we actually ended up getting gas in Dead Horse, too, just to top her off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
it's like, now that I've been, I'm not going to go back.
That's exactly how we feel.
It's a container town for transient workers. Nobody lives there year round, and it's
we were told nobody lives there full time.
Yeah.
So, we'll see.
So we get back to Hook and we load up in the airboat, and he just basically takes us up a big river to a medium river, and then finally up a smaller river. And he's like, yep, you can camp right there. And that was it. And so we're like, okay, we're here.
They are. And Dead Horse Outfitters is a legal transporter for Alaska. There's a large difference in Alaska between transporters and outfitters and guides and things like that. So they are just a transporter. So they don't give you any information. I don't think they're legally allowed to. They're just like, hey, we are taking you from point A to point B, and we will see you afterwards.
Oh, here's a pin on the map. Take me there. Got it. I figured that he might have given you guys a pointer on there's caribou here or there.
No pointers. And that's fine. We already had our game plan. We already felt comfortable with what Thor had told us and everything we had come up with.
The game plan, once we got to the spot, was essentially the same, which is just glass, sit and wait, and get to a high spot and look as far as we could look. But Hook drops us off, and we set up camp. And at this point, it's about 7:30-ish p.m. at night on Sunday night. On a Sunday night. Yeah, 6 or 7. So we got camp set up, and we're like, hey, let's go up and just glass for a second, see what we can see. At this point, we've traveled, we've driven all through the night, and we're going on close to 40-something hours of being awake.
I remember Thor told me on your trip, Thor, didn't you guys got back there, and you hiked, you backpacked, but didn't you tell me that you guys slept for like ever?
Oh, yeah, after that first day, I trying to remember, I don't think we drove. We definitely did not drive through the night, but we drove like all day. And I think we got in at like 11 at night, and then slept on the side of the road until way too late the next day. But it's like, it's light pretty nearly 24 hours up there still. So
yes.
you kind of start to forget what time it really is.
It's super disorienting.
It's very, very odd.
Yeah. So we get camp set up. We're pretty much ready to where we could turn in, but Kevin and I want to just go glass for a second.
You guys are amped. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're exhausted at the same time. So David, who was our guest on this trip, he's a writer for Outdoor Sports Group, a couple magazines, and he's a go-getter, like hardcore dude. And I hadn't hunted with him before, but just hanging around him at some events, I could just tell, like, homie's pretty intense.
That's kind of difficult too, hunting with somebody new. You don't know if they're going to be wanting to get out there and go do it, or if they're going to...
We prefaced this pretty hard, though.
Oh, good.
This was a serious trip.
We pitched it kind of like Thor was saying earlier. It's like, this is not a hunt. What we're going to take you on is an adventure, and if we're lucky, we may get to shoot some caribou.
Gotcha.
So he was gung-ho from the start, and we said, this is not like a glamping, like, you know, there's no frills about this. This is hard work, and it's an adventure, and that's all we're going to promise. Anyway, it's around 7 p.m. And Kevin and I are going to go up the hill. I'm like, hey, Dave, you want to go hike up this hill? I mean, it's a quarter to half mile up this hill. He's like, I'm really tired. I think I'm going to take a nap. I'll when you come back down, I'll have some dinner with you.
And at this point, our plan was to maybe do shifts and stay through, which is just looking back on it, it's kind of hilarious that we even thought about this, because after being there, I don't think you have to do that.
You don't need to do shifts necessarily.
No, but we thought we were gonna. So we thought he was going to take a nap to get up and do some shifts. So we went and looked for caribou. Mac, our camera guy, had a fishing license, and he actually caught a couple grayling.
Which we ate that night. It's awesome.
Which we ate. And, oh, God, I love fish, and that was just like one of the highlights for me.
So we glass up absolutely no caribou that night.
Oh, no.
We see nothing. Just miles of tundra, and that's all we can see. And so feel a hair defeated, but we're like, well, we're here. It's awesome. It's really barely the first day. We go back down to the tent, and I'm like, hey, Dave, we're gonna eat. He's like,
oh no,
like
yeah.
just out. And I'm like, all right, I know that sound. We're gonna leave David alone, and we'll catch up with him tomorrow. So we ate, and then it was pretty much lights out. We were all exhausted.
Yeah.
And we slept for eternity.
It felt like forever. I'm usually an early riser kind of person. Not this day.
And I woke up at like 3 a.m. and it was daylight, and I went out of the tent to pee and just glassed for caribou because, I mean, you can.
What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
Well, I went back to sleep. I looked around a little bit, and I was like, none here. I'm going back to sleep. I went back to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
we all pretty much slept till about 9 a.m.
Yeah,
which on a hunt, that's
you would never do.
Never.
But we must have been super tired, and we wake up at 9 o'clock. We eat breakfast. We goof around. It's raining.
It's terrible.
Thor, when you guys went, was it raining pretty much the whole time, or did you guys get some good days?
I wouldn't call any of the days good. I have been there on spectacular days. My wife did a trip there a year ago and earlier in the summer, and they spent most of the time not even being able to sleep in their sleeping bags. They had temperatures upwards of 80 degrees.
Oh, man.
But when I went back in August, it was normally the main river that runs along the highway there, the Sag River that everybody kind of references off of. Normally that river runs about 6,000 CFS this time of year. It was 12,000 when we got there, and when we finished our trip, it was 38,000 CFS.
Totally blown out. Oh my gosh!
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's wild.
So we were at camp. So we were set up right on another, we would say it, a smaller river, but it was still big enough that you couldn't cross it with waders. You'd literally have to swim it.
Yeah, it'd be a swim.
So we were incredibly lucky that our initial plan was to bring the Alpacka Rafts, because we actually didn't blow them up yet because we were so tired. Right. And we woke up, let's just say day one of actual hunting, and
9 a.m.
It's raining. David got plenty of rest, so he went up on the hill and was glassing. And when I came out to go to the bathroom like hours later, he told me to come up there. So we all geared up. We went to the top of the hill, and he saw Musk Ox. He had seen a couple groups of caribou off in the distance, and we started having a ball.
We're getting excited. We're seeing stuff. We can see what our caribou way Like not even a chance of making a play on them, and they're not moving in our direction at all. But there's some caribou here, which is cool.
It made you feel good.
Yeah.
So then we walked around quite a bit, looked around a little bit more, and then we decided to go eat lunch. So we walked back to camp, and we ate lunch.
Yep. So there's the river, our camp, and then kind of behind our camp, away from the river, is this hill that we were using as a glassing spot. So we came down and we ate, and it didn't make sense. All four of us didn't need to go up the hill each time to glass, because even that, just walking through the tundra can be a little bit tough. So Kevin and Mac and I, just after lunch, we were going to just stay put. We actually played cards in the tent for a little bit. The weather was still pretty poor, and we're playing some.
We figured we had time.
Playing some gin rummy and having a good time in the tent. And Dave, I think he maybe even took a short nap.
Yeah, we did.
And then
because he woke me up.
Yeah, and then he was going to go back up the hill and glass. He does that. And then we're just about to take a nap. Like, he's up there, we're good, we got eyes on the whole place, and he comes down and he's got that excitement. You know, like the excitement when you see that like trophy elk or whatever, and he's like, "We gotta go." And we're like,
and I remember I was asleep and I woke up and I was like, "What?" And he's like, bull across the river." And he was like, I was like, "Okay." And he was like, "It's a shooter bull." And I was like, "Okay." And just to reference this, we were in our bags resting. No.
Shoes are off.
I mean, we're talking dead asleep. I was. He woke me up. Max said he woke him up from REM sleep. But this is just a testament to the Alpacka Raft.
Yeah.
25 minutes after we woke up, we were dressed, had our gear, had our camera equipment, and had 3 rafts
inflated,
fully blown up, and were across the river.
Yeah.
Because at that time, we didn't know where they were moving to, or if it was the only bull we'd see, or like, it's just the first one that you're like, I'm going to shoot. So you're like, I'm going full in on this bad boy. But we blew those rafts up so fast.
Yeah, so if Thor could probably tell us better, but it's basically a dry bag that you use to inflate that you screw on the connection to the raft, and then the other end is just open. And so you kind of like you jimmy it a little bit, catch some air, and then close it off and start to roll it like you would a dry bag. And then you just put your weight on it and inflate
and it pushes the air.
I'd actually like to ask, I've never asked Thor that, but Thor, what would be your, how do you use that system? See if I used it the same way.
That's pretty much it. You thread on the adapter, and then you capture air in the bag. And there's some tricks to doing that. If you pull the bag tight, you're going to pull, all the air is going to go out of it. So you just kind of shake it loose like you would a trash bag.
Yep.
And I close it with my hand and grab the whole top of the bag with one hand, and I bring it up to basically right underneath my chin.
Yep.
And then I put the rest of the bag on my body, and I do a crunch to squeeze the whole thing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So that's how you guys
technique.
got out of camp, inflated 3 rafts incredibly fast.
It's not like a pump. Like, it's not like you put your feet on it like a bicycle pump and pump it up. Like, it's this very unique system that actually worked super well.
Yeah, really, really good. And so once you get it about as tight as you can get it with call it the inflator bag, you put some breaths in it. And I used to be a rafting guide, and like it to be really tight while you're on the water, so you're not getting any folds. And so we're just trying to breathe into it, really like we're trying to hustle, right? So we're breathing in it really heavy, and we got them all inflated. And Mac doubled up with David, and then Kevin and I took a raft across, and
we went to a gravel bar in the middle with the current, and then went from that gravel bar across to another one.
Nice.
And then we can skip probably an hour and 15 minutes of trekking.
Just trying to get across this tundra.
One important key is to come back to Thor's note about always being wet.
Always wet. So we crossed the river, but across the tundra, any low spot, it just collects water. It's like that tundra, it's just constantly draining the frozen stuff underneath. And you come across anything, and there's what I don't know, we'd call a brook or a creek here, but
I'd call it a creek.
Some are flowing, some are not, some are ankle deep, some are waist deep.
And for this reference, I will say Luke and David went full bore.
Yeah,
running to where we thought we would intercept these caribou, which is the number one thing everybody told us was to do not chase caribou. We either thought
there's no rules.
We either thought they passed us or that they bedded. But it's funny because these creeks were knee high, and up until this point, I was still dry.
Yeah.
And Thor, you told me, you were like, you're going to always be wet. And I was like, I'm going to make sure I don't get wet. Well, that didn't happen.
Not possible.
It's not possible.
It's not possible. We started going through knee-deep sludge, and by the time we were on the top of the other ridge, there were no caribou, and we were soaked.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And Kevin, Mac, and I had never put our eyes on these caribou. It was David who saw them up on the hillside, and he's like, they're moving
towards us.
Generally towards us.
But they were miles away at that point.
Well, and I know how it goes when you see an animal and the adrenaline hits your head. And then for you to remember the keen details of where that animal was at, where they were headed, the speed.
Yeah.
And then to run back down to camp, get out of breath, inflating 3 rafts. I can understand how things could get lost in the mix.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. So we essentially went from asleep to this sprint across, getting the rafts across the river, across the tundra, what's called a mile to a mile and a half. And then
true mile, because we had the GPS tracking us.
Yeah. And we stop and we're like, we can't see nothing. This is unbelievable. We feel like we're debating. Like, if they went that way, we'd have seen them. If they went over here, we'd have seen them. They got to be just over the ridge. And Kevin's like, we don't chase caribou.
I was the negative Nancy. I was a negative Nancy on this one.
Told you so.
I had gotten to the point where I was soaking wet, and I was like, this sucks. And we were seeing, like, you saw how fast. Thor, when you were seeing them, when you've done this before, it seems like they eat, and then they just kind of run. I rarely saw caribou.
I don't know if they can walk. Or maybe their walk is a run, but they haul butt.
I mean, I'm talking fast.
They move. They move. So the year before our hunt, we had gone up to this high point and we're glassing around where we'd seen caribou the day before, saw nothing. Then suddenly we've been sitting there an hour, and then we're like, hey, that's a bull out there. And it was probably 5 miles away, or like 4 miles away. It was a long way away.
Right.
And within like 30 minutes, it's like a mile and a half away. And we're like, okay, let's watch it a little bit more. Maybe we should try to get closer to this bull. And then this is actually kind of comical because we're watching this bull, and I think we all kind of like stopped paying attention for a few minutes. And we decided to go after it. So we're all like getting our gear ready because we were trying to dry out while we were sitting on top of this little ridge top. And everybody had been looking down. Nobody had been paying attention to where the bull was. And one of the guys looks up as we're about ready to go, and he's like, oh, man, it's like 500 yards away and coming towards us. We have to go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no way. And sure enough, pull up the binoculars, and here's this bull just coming straight at us. So we like freak out, run after this thing. Long story short, we end up getting that bull, and a few minutes later, we realized it wasn't even the bull we had been watching, because we were like,
some
hey,
other bull.
Wow.
That other bull's still there.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Wow.
The whole place is very
that
disorienting.
Sounds so similar.
It does.
And I'm glad to hear that story because at the end of it, I'm like, I wonder if all the caribou we saw were scared, but they're not. They just the way they do things.
Yeah, they're just weird animals. So we're sitting on the side of this hill debating, like, if we go this way, we may not see them. If we go that way, we may not see them.
Right.
But there's like one last ridge to climb. I've got kids, and sometimes you just say, it's a little bit further. It's a little bit further.
One more ridge.
Kevin was
That's
over
what they did to me.
Yeah, and Kevin was over here like, this was the one more ridge.
Oh, no. I do that to my little brother all the time.
We went 2 ridges too far, in my opinion.
Yep.
Yeah.
But eventually, I was probably 100 yards behind you guys.
We took the
and
last
I saw
ridge.
that thing where they turned around and they looked at me, and I was like, that caribou's right there.
Yeah.
That's how you got to
You can see that look in their eyes.
So we crossed the last ridge, and it was about 700 yards away.
Okay.
Group of 4 bulls. Mm-hmm. And long story short on this one, we get close. We're actually testing out a new Weatherby cartridge on this trip. And David, our friend on the trip, just absolutely hammers this bull. Mm-hmm. We've got a great footage of it. We're going to have a great film of it. But that was a really cool experience. We dropped the first bull. We felt like, I remember we all were like, we've done it.
Yeah. Like the trip is a success.
We were like, we've done it. We can't believe this.
We can't believe it.
You just think about how far you've gone to be in the middle of nowhere. And you're like, this thing just walked by and we shot it. Mm-hmm. That's a weird feeling sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it gets really real quick when you get an animal on the ground after you've done such a journey, the whole travel and everything. If you think back,
we were far enough where we were on a flat space and camp had disappeared.
Yep.
Oh. So I was like, well, this will be fun. And it was 8 p.m. at that point.
It's 8 p.m. and
no food.
We know now that we are 2 miles from camp at this point.
Well, thankfully, you don't have to worry about the sun going down on you.
That's true.
We didn't. Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah. So we did the stuff, quartered it out and got all the meat and put it in bags, took some great pics, played with their antlers. Man, they're crazy. They're in velvet.
Right.
And they're still growing. So the antler tips are super squishy.
Mushy.
It's weird.
And you can move the antlers. Like you can make it wider if you wanted to.
There you go.
Yeah.
Or more narrow.
Yeah, they're wild.
Wow.
But yeah, they're just full of blood and still growing, and so.
Thor, was your trip last year same time frame? Was that first week of August?
Yeah, we were 1 week later, but the bulls were in the same condition.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay.
But really cool.
And I don't know if you guys were like this. Like their coat was really thin and really soft and clean.
Yes.
Yeah. The one that, yes, they were. I thought ours were like maybe a little transitionary on the coats because they were shedding. Or the one I ended up shooting was shedding. Like you could pull the hair, like trying to pull the skin off the hide, and I would just get like handfuls of loose fur, like a lab that's shedding its coat. Yeah, it's wild.
Wow. Yeah, and it was super soft though. I remember being like, "Wow, soft. This is crazy."
Yeah.
Very different from winter, because I grew up with winter caribou, where you get their coats, 3-4 inches long and thick.
Right.
Yeah,
and a different color, right? Is that crazy?
Yeah,
but
these are like dark brown.
I heard that it actually turns whitish in the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a much lighter gray, and then the bulls get this really big white sort of all their throat and chest are white.
That's interesting.
Whereas in the summer they're much browner.
Yeah.
So we packed David's caribou out about 2 miles through the tundra. Luckily we have 4 people, and it was some work.
One trip. Nice.
One trip.
Yeah.
Nice.
Mac actually carried quite a bit.
Mac's a stud.
Yeah, Mac brought quite a bit. I think he brought a front and a back.
Yeah.
I took a front. You took a back.
I had a back and some loose meat. And
then David. We always want the guy to carry the head. So David took some loose cuts and the head.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Now we got it all back. But I'm not gonna lie, it was
work.
It was work.
2 miles in the tundra.
And we got back at
weight.
12:15 because then we crossed the river in the Alpacka Rafts.
Oh.
And then
to get back.
Yeah. I actually think that I was just like, I don't care if it was my bull or this bull. I'm going to walk straight into the tent and cook food. Right. And that's what I did. That's exactly what I did.
You guys had to have eaten part of it that night.
Not that night.
No,
that
really.
night.
I wanted we've been listening to some stuff. I wanted the meat to rig up.
Yeah.
I wanted to give the meat 24 hours before we ate it.
Okay.
And I actually feel like that actually worked.
Yeah. We can just do the full on
Shout out
to the Meat Eater podcast. Red Cutter was really, really good info.
It was
interesting. They had a meat scientist on there talking about how to handle and prep and when the best time to start eating game meat is.
Right.
If we had eaten it right then, they said that the heat reacts with the live muscle tissue.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of paraphrasing. And then it would toughen up when you're cooking it, applying the heat.
Okay.
And I don't think they're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, we waited 24 hours, and it was by far the best meat I've had in a really long time.
Yeah, so essentially by cooking it, you're inducing early rigor mortis.
It's going to be
just
tougher.
Stays tough. So if you let it rig up and then kind of soften back up and then cook it, it expels some of the proteins that give it a bad taste.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Huh.
In theory.
Yeah. So, I've always let deer or antelope, stuff around here hang for a week or 2 weeks, depending on what it is. But.
So we shoot the bull, we fall asleep. We wake up the next day at 9 o'clock a.m. again. We couldn't get up even if we wanted to.
We were exhausted.
Even if we wanted to glass for caribou, there was no chance we were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So we wake up, we have a really big breakfast. Luke's crushing his mountain house meals.
I did not go hungry.
Luke had 4 or 5 a day. That's an exaggeration, but you probably had 4.
I had a lot of food on this trip. I'm not going to lie.
And David goes up on top of the glassing.
We're still making some breakfast.
We leave the rafts inflated.
Yep.
Because
we've learned our lesson at this point.
We might have to cross that river again.
Right.
So David goes up to a glassing point. I am like, hey, Luke and Mac, I'm going to go on up there. So I start walking up to David, and as I get closer to David, I see him pull his binoculars down very quickly, and I'm like, okay. And he looks at me and he puts his hands above his head, and he's like, coming right at us. And I'm like, okay. So I begin to run.
Down the hill through the tussocks.
He told me, he's like, they're moving incredibly fast.
But you were going up the hill without a rifle?
No, I had all my gear.
Okay.
I had all my gear with me.
Yeah, but we were crossing the river behind the tent, and they're across the river in front of the tent.
I had to go back to the tent to get the rafts, to cross the river to intercept the caribou.
Wow.
And there was a group of bulls coming. He said multiple shooters in this group.
Yeah. So
I come running.
So Mac and I are just about finished kind of gearing up because we're going to follow. It's strange. We didn't feel a lot of time pressure on this trip. I think some of it had to do with the sun, but it was more lax than I normally would feel while hunting. Anyway, so me and Mac are kind of just getting our last, got the rifle, got glove, whatever.
Sure.
And we see Kevin like running down.
I'm almost waddling. I feel like on the video it's going to look ridiculous. I feel like to think that I'm a pretty athletic guy, but when you're trying to run in those tussocks with a pack on, I feel like you look stupid.
Yeah. So I
felt cool in the moment. I felt like I was looking pretty cool, but I saw the footage and I looked pretty stupid.
I tell Mac, I'm like, Mac, turn the camera on. Kevin's running, which is a good sign, but until we know what's going on exactly, let's just record this. So I'm telling the camera, I'm like, hey, we're getting ready. It's the next morning after we killed last night. Something good's happening because Kevin is sprinting, in air quotes. He is sprinting down the hill right towards us.
Nice.
And he comes up, and he's so excited. He's like, they're coming across the river. We got to go. We got to go.
Can't hear anything.
He's so pumped. It was awesome. And so the three of us, Kevin, Mac, and I, we throw our packs in the Alpacka Rafts, which are literally like 10 yards from the river. We just jump in the water. And Kevin says something genius in hindsight.
And we hustle. And I don't know why I thought of it, but I did.
He saw where they were, and they were basically headed downriver. And so he's like, let's just float down a ways.
Sure.
We'll pick up a quarter or half mile of
and
trying
we'll
to
make
cut
it
them
up
off.
later after we kill caribou. Who cares?
Right.
We'll carry everything back. It won't matter.
Right.
So we dumped down quarter mile, something like that, and
that is exactly what we needed to do.
It was. So as soon as we got out of the water, we basically as close to a sprint as you can travel
on that type of terrain,
about 500 yards. Mm-hmm. We try to follow a little low drainage. We're just getting sloppy wet.
So same thing goes back to it. There's creeks everywhere. We're knee deep in water, and it's crazy.
There's no hope of staying dry, so you might as well embrace it.
We embraced it at this point, and we're just it's like kids playing in a puddle at this point.
Exactly. Sure. Does that sound right, Thor, to you? I mean, it was like just go for it, whatever it takes.
Oh yeah. When it's on, it's wet, and you're just like doing whatever you can do.
Yeah, so we're just taking the shortest distance. They're moving, and I haven't seen them really at this point because the same deal. Kevin and David saw them from up on the hillside, and we get the first glimpse of them, and I'm like, oh, yeah, there are multiple shooters in there. And so we kind of pick a low draw, like they're coming across. So we head down, and we find a spot where it looks like we can shoot them at about 300-400 yards.
Yes.
And in our process of getting set up, it's hard to shoot on that stuff. We didn't bring shooting sticks. We have some bipods, but the tussocks is so thick that you really can't get a good enough elevation to lay prone.
Oh, gotcha.
So I'm trying to mess with my backpack. I got it standing up, and I'm trying to figure out if I can balance my rifle on there.
And I'm getting set up.
Kevin's getting our camera tripod.
Heard about
from Mac.
Yep.
He's getting set up, and in the process, they've now closed to 100 yards.
Oh, they're on top of you.
They're pretty much
literally
right,
on a line to
just
us.
Straight at
They
us.
could have gone the other route, which a different group of caribou did at the same time.
Okay.
So we thought, it'd be 300-yard shot. So we were trying to get set up. But in this process, they split. The bulls split from the group of cows, and the bulls chose to come directly to us.
Okay. And did they see you? I mean, are you guys?
They saw us at 100.
They saw us at 100 for sure, because then they started to go parallel to us.
They started to move parallel to us, but it was too late.
Got it.
They gave us too much time.
Yeah. So Luke
says, take the first shot. So
Kevin shoots. You're shooting 6.5 RPM.
I shot
that. Well, by the time this podcast goes out, it'll be announced. But we're going to load the 156 burgers.
Oh yeah, that announcement.
Yeah.
I also had a product that isn't out yet either.
Yeah, but it's the 156 burger with the 6.5 RPM. Dropped that thing.
Crushed it 100 yards.
And then about 19 seconds later, I shot at 120 yards with a 6.5 300 with that 156 Berger and just dropped it.
Right. Now, are caribou tough animals? I mean,
we're proud of Weatherby ballistics and all that, and no, they're not tough animals.
Gotcha. So this put the hammer on them.
Yeah. So, hey, Thor, I'm curious, when you guys when you have hunted out there before or even last year, what did you guys do for stabilization on shots, or did you?
We didn't, because it was so Joe, as he was basically very similar to how you described. He kind of moved in on this caribou, and then it got up and started running, and Craig and I are sitting there watching in binoculars about 400 yards away from him.
Sounds super
and
similar.
we're like, Joe, you got to shoot. And then we're like, whoa, the caribou just fell down. Why did it trip?
Why did it trip?
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that terrain.
David, so he spotted these originally. He never left his glassing spot.
So he's probably 800 yards away.
Yeah, he's about 800, exactly 800. Cool. And he watched the whole thing go down. He watched us float down river, try to make a beeline for him. Man. He's watching them kind of graze our way. And
talk about entertainment.
He described the same thing. He goes, that caribou fell down. Yeah. And then a few seconds later, he heard the boom.
Right.
Yeah, he said that he had his spotting scope on the biggest caribou, and then all of a sudden the caribou fell down, and in his mind he's like, what just happened? And then he heard a boom, and he was like, oh my goodness.
It registered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said then he transitioned to the next biggest one, which then I shot with, and it was awesome.
Wow.
So
it was cool.
I shot at about 120 yards. Kevin shot 100 yards, and I think maybe they made 40 or 50 yards in that like kind of 20 seconds. And they're a little bit like mule deer will do, when they'll get a little spooked, they'll run off and then stop and turn broadside.
Right.
That's exactly what he did.
Perfect.
And after I shot mine, I was kind of looking, and I was like, hey, this one's got good back scratchers. This one looks good. Like, just like, hey, it's the one in the front or the one in the back. We were trying to figure out which one was the best.
Yeah.
The second best.
So at this point, it's about 10:30 in the morning, and in the span of 14 hours, we shot 3 caribou.
How about that? That's better than what you expected. Yes? No?
Or
you didn't have expectations?
We had low expectations.
But I think it's good to go in with low expectations. Yeah. I still had great expectations, but I had the realization that if we didn't shoot 3 caribou, everything would be fine.
These are not Boone and Crockett caribou.
Right.
But to me, they're amazing caribou. Like, they're really good representative caribou. They have all got the shovels on the front, the bezels, and then your tops, and they all have what you're looking for. And each one of ours had, like, I think I had the best bezels. You had the best shovels. Yeah. David had the best tops.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, and you guys, this was your first caribou, right?
Yeah.
Was it everybody's first caribou?
It was. Yeah.
That's cool.
Which actually made the trip really cool, because none of us fully knew what to expect. We didn't know. We've heard stories, but we didn't know how tough, how smart, how weary these animals are.
Right.
So it was really cool.
So then we obviously got everything back to camp. We relaxed the rest of the day. We really
we one-tripped the 2 caribou out.
We did. We put a lot in our pack. I was like, I'm not coming back over
It was
here.
600 yards to the river.
That's all we had to do. I can struggle for 600 yards. So we spent some time cleaning both those animals, got them to the river, crossed back over in the Alpacka Rafts. We then saw some Musk Ox later on in the day, played some cards.
We actually rafted down the river about a half mile just to raft past these Musk Ox, which was awesome.
Yeah. So we had it was really, really impressive. But what was more exciting was the next day we knew we were going to try to raft out. And we didn't mention this, but I believe we were about 22, 23 miles
upriver.
Mm-hmm. So he took us quite a ways upriver. And we knew we had a full day of rafting ahead of us. So
it was a double-edged sword. At this point, we're on this high. We've shot 3 caribou, and we're ready to go out. We have to go out because we actually had a phenomenal day. And Thor, I've got a Garmin Instinct watch and the little Tempe temperature sensor, and I had it in our tent that day. We recorded 115 degrees inside the tent at around 3 o'clock that day because the sun was full bore.
Oof.
And we're like, oh man, what are we going to do with this meat? It's actively hot. It is wild. So we're like, we got to go. We got to go tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and Thor, you were saying you haven't had many good days. I feel blessed.
No doubt.
Because the morning we shot our caribou, it was gorgeous. And we knew that the next day with our inReach told us that it was going to be just as good of a day, which actually was colder the second day.
It was a hair colder, but
it was still sunny. Like you had sun out, and there was no rain, and it felt real good.
It was a really nice day to raft down.
And, I've been up there enough that I've had plenty of sunny days, and sunny days up there are something special.
They're gorgeous. Gorgeous.
That's actually what Hook told us. He said, you guys are here on one of the only days I've seen in the last 90 days.
Wow.
That were that nice. So I was actually really bummed that we were set. We brought enough food and stuff to be there basically till Thursday, and we're done Tuesday morning.
Way oversupplied.
Yeah, Thursday, actually Friday, because we're not flying out till Monday. So we're like, we can stay here Friday, really Saturday if we really, really have to. And we're like, no, we got to get this meat out of here because it's hot. So we actually put some in bags in the river just to try to get it cool. And we ate some that night.
We did.
And had a little feast with some fish and some caribou. And oh my goodness, it was awesome. It was delicious.
It was awesome. So obviously the next day we got all of our rafts situated, which took us probably a couple hours.
Yeah, because at this point we have to deflate them because Thor, you could say this best, but you guys have a couple models. You have the ones with the zipper for the storage and some without, and all of ours had the zipper storage. So we actually had to pull the zipper to deflate the rafts, restuff them, and then reinflate. Then we're trying to be pretty particular about balancing the weight and make sure we don't have too far forward or all the weight on the right.
Right.
Thor, how many out of all the models you guys have, is the Cargo Fly version probably your most popular model?
Yeah, it's about, so on our sort of generic model we call the Classic, which is our most popular by far, it's about a 60-40 split cargo fly to no cargo fly.
Wow.
But then if you look across all the models, we're probably about 75-25 because a lot of models are cargo fly only.
Gotcha.
So in those mules you have, it's probably closer to 80-20 cargo fly.
Yeah. That thing was awesome. I was blown away at how well they handled.
Stable.
Yeah.
It's shallow in the water.
We didn't have any like true rapids, right? I mean, it was
pretty easy,
pretty gentle float. There were some good waves, like some water got in, but nothing super hairy. And it was still with that, like they're tough. Like we did not have a ton of rain, like Thor experienced, like record washout on the river. It was like you got to pick the right channel or you're going to be stuck on a gravel bar.
Every time we came up to the next spot, we pretty much was like, Luke, where should we go? And Luke was able to read that and
right with his history.
That.
Yeah,
because I caught bottom twice over 18 miles. So on twice did I scrape some rock bottom, but I actually never had to get out. No, I never had to.
And once was on purpose because we saw some caribou or musk ox, and we took away we wouldn't have gone because we wanted to try to get closer and look at them.
Right. Yeah. So now on your way out, you guys floated down, and then did you link back up with somebody else?
Well, we saw musk ox on the way down. We have some killer pictures of us with loaded down Alpacka Rafts, caribou on the front with musk ox in the background, which was really cool to see an animal like that. I mean, that's a prehistoric beast.
Not everybody sees those.
Not everybody sees those.
Yeah.
Thor, you said you see them sometimes?
I've seen them almost every time I've been up on the slope. They're so cool though. The first time you see one, you can't even believe it. We this last trip we were walking up the river. We went up and I thought it was a bear, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's a bear on the other side of the river." And we were watching, and out comes this gigantic musk ox. Because when they're actually in the willows and you can just see their back,
they
no doubt
have
that hump on the front.
Do have,
and it's the right color,
like a grizzly hump.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Did you guys run into any bears while you guys were up there?
No bears.
So we ran into no bears, but there were tracks in the sand by our camp, not from the time we were there. They were there when we got there. Were they fresher? Probably. I'd have to say they were within 10 days of when we got to that camp. But never once was I concerned about a bear.
Never got worried.
But I'm also not that bear sensitive, so.
We never saw one.
Never saw any.
Cool. So we rafted down, which was really one of the highlights of the trip.
I would agree.
Because just to be that far Alaska's remote anyway, and now we're 20 some odd miles upriver, and we're just going to float down just kind of out of the pace of the river. And we've got 3 great caribou on the front of our Alpacka Rafts, and we're just Yeah, I mean, it felt like a glorious day in my life.
You know, and I actually
an absolute win.
Yes.
Yeah, and I actually didn't talk. You know me, I kind of talk a lot.
A little bit.
I didn't talk that much on that trip, on the float.
Just soaking it in?
I did.
Oh, wow.
I did, and I actually halfway through it, I was like, I'm totally cool with like just sitting here and rafting down this river, like knowing what we just did.
Wow.
I felt so good about it.
I had it. Go ahead, Thor.
It feels like cheating. You don't really. You're kind of like, wow, because you know, as we all know, packing meat is like hard work.
It's hard.
Like you're happy about it, but it's kind of funny how you're really happy about it when you first start doing it. After you cut up the animal and you're like first pack out, you're like, I'm ready for this. But then if it's like a whole bunch of trips or it's a long way, it gets old fast.
The fun runs
like,
out real quick.
Oh man, I don't know how far I want to walk with this. And then you put them on the raft, and suddenly you're like, wait, this is totally unfair because I am like relaxing. I'm watching the world go by. I got my binoculars out. I'm eating food. If I brought, you know, I can take a drink or something, and we're just cruising down with the river.
Yeah. One thing to mention that was crazy cool was that while we're rafting down this river, a giant mudslide happens next to us.
Yeah, on a bend in the river.
I thought to myself, what are the chances that where we are and what we're doing, we raft by this little ravine, and it was probably 30 foot tall, and it was loud. Like it was like a rock slide you'd hear from across a canyon and be like, where is that? Like it was really rushing loud, and it was shooting mud out the side of this hillside. It was crazy.
Yeah,
just randomly happened.
Yeah.
I always hate that feeling when you're going under a bridge or next to a cliff or something like that. And you're like, I wonder when that's going to go.
When is this going to give out?
We almost got it. We almost got it.
I had a similar feeling to Kev rafting down. It's just, man, it was kind of nostalgic. I was only a rafting guide for 3 summers in college, and I was like 20-something years ago, you know, or almost 20 years ago. And I hadn't logged many river miles since that time, and I loved that time of my life. And it was just this like finalization of like hunting, rafting, outdoor adventure, packing, like everything.
It's a culmination of all your skills that you've
built that are kind of built over my life.
And
I was like,
uncertainty.
Yeah, it just the adventure of it was better than the culmination of everything was better than any one part, and just being able to do it all together, including the overnight drive on the haul road. I mean, it was awesome.
What I could imagine was just the ultimate sense of freedom that you guys had on that trip.
Yeah.
You know, to go up there and it's on your own time, and you guys are trying to use all the skills that you guys have used your whole life, and it all came together. So I can imagine that float back was just awesome.
It was cool. And Thor, we're really glad that you're able to join us for this call, because those rafts made this trip possible.
And not only that, your input, your advice, and those rafts. I mean, the whole thing was just really, we owe you to putting us on it.
Yeah. And if Kevin said, hey, I want to go back next year and we're going to hike 5 miles in across the tundra to the 5 mile mark, I'll be like, hard pass. But if the rafts are involved, I'm in 1,000%. For sure.
Yep. Yeah, and you can start just piecing together some really amazing trips up there where, you just get in the backpack and if you're working river valleys, as soon as you get into animals, you have no worries getting out.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we ended up floating all the way out. Had a killer time. Had an amazing time. I'm trying to think about.
So basically, we hooked back up with Hook and Dead Horse Outfitters, and they were so accommodating. They're like, "Hey, we got a table," and so we were coming in. We're debating, like, do we start driving back to Fairbanks tonight? We need to get this meat cold. And he's like, well, I got a freezer and a generator. So we were tired after rafting down. It's not hard work necessarily, but it took 7 hours to get down. And we're like, well, let's just process these suckers. So at this point, they're all quartered on the bone still in. And we basically cut major muscle groups. I cut some steaks, but he had a vacuum sealer in the middle of nowhere. So we vacuum sealed some select cuts and
set us up for success on the way back and getting the meat home.
They didn't freeze solid overnight just because we dumped 200 pounds of thermal mass into a not huge freezer, but they got cold enough that we could get to Fairbanks and
And quick shout out to Eric.
Shout out.
Guy in Fairbanks that we met, super cool guy who let us use his freezer to freeze the meat through a third connection through another guy named Steven, shout out, who also helped us out with a bunch of stuff along the trip with some information, and then freezer space and taxidermists and everything along the way.
Yeah.
So we were really able to put this thing together, which was great. Thor, we've got you on the line, and we do a thing that we call the Weatherby Top 5.
Weatherby Top 5.
Got it.
So Kevin's going to shoot some questions at you, and you got to answer them pretty rapid fire.
Yeah. So what is this? This is going to be a tough one for you, I think. But what is your favorite pack raft trip you've done? I mean, you've probably done so many, but give us your favorite.
Oh, it's unquestionably the second one I ever did before we started the company. We walked 700 miles from the center of the Arctic Refuge, so about 200 miles east of where you guys were, all the way to the village of Kobuk.
Okay. Hold up. We got to back this up a little bit.
You walked how far?
700 miles. I was 22 years old.
He's in his prime.
That's crazy.
Is that possible?
That's so
all right.
far.
That's room for another podcast.
Yeah, we're going to have Thor back on soon.
Experience.
Wow.
Okay.
39 days. We averaged 12 miles a day. Me and 4 college friends. And we did not have boats. Like, we started the company because the boats I took weren't up for that kind of a trip.
Wow.
Okay. Well, that's one of the best answers I've ever gotten on the top 5. What about your first pack raft hunting trip? One that you exclusively used your pack raft for hunting purposes.
It's actually my best pack raft hunting trip. My dad and I moved out of Alaska in 2004. My dad was still living in Alaska, and for anybody that's there, if you hunt grizzly, Dall sheep, or mountain goat, you have to have a guide or be with an Alaska resident within second degree of kindred. My dad was still living there.
Wow.
He and I drew a party tag for the Delta controlled use area for Dall sheep. And so my dad and my wife and I hiked in 30 miles, killed an awesome ram, and we were back to the car in 5 hours on a river we didn't even know what it was going to be like.
My gosh.
I was like, this is how this works.
That's awesome.
God, we gotta do this. We gotta record one tomorrow.
So many great stories. I think
that was the last Dall sheep I killed, and that's probably the thing I missed most about living in Alaska is the ability to go hunt Dall sheep.
No, trust me, I know the feeling because I can't.
Kevin said that he's going to move there.
Listen, easy. This is the Weatherby podcast.
We were doing all kinds of strategies on how we could pull this off.
What it would take for Adam to let us move to Alaska and then to convince our wives, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Polygamy even came up, but it's not a good option.
Question number 3.
It's funny you mentioned the polygamy thing because my friend that I told you about, that my wife and I have this long running joke, and who's up in Fairbanks, I said, as soon as polygamy is allowed, you and I are getting married so I can go hunt Dall sheep with you.
Yep.
That's funny.
Yep.
We had similar discussions.
And we had a lot of time in the car to talk about how we could do that more. So anyways, question 3.
Question 3 would be, it sounds like you've done some crazy stuff, but what is a dream hunt you have that you haven't done?
Oh man, I'd love to do, I've been trying to kill archery elk for several years now, and they're hard to kill, and it's probably as much fun as I've ever had hunting. But I would love to do an archery elk pack raft hunt, probably in British Columbia. Someday I'll get that done.
Wow, yeah, that's cool.
That'd be a good one.
That's a good one. That's a good one. You know what I like about that answer, Thor, is that you chose an animal that is a heavily hunted animal. You know, like if somebody were asking me what's my dream hunt, I'd say a mountain goat or a sheep. And I think most people would say one of those animals that's more of those elusive type games. And I like that you chose that elk in that specific situation. That's pretty cool. What about your favorite?
I have a skewed life experience.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
For sure.
I grew up in rural Alaska doing adventures. My parents had dogs. We had dog teams. We did all that kind of stuff. I've shot 4 Doll rams and I've never shot an elk. So I have this bizarre resume.
Yeah,
that is
a bizarre resume.
Yeah.
What about your favorite state to hunt?
Oh, Alaska for sure.
Yeah, I figured that'd be your answer.
Yep.
And then the last question is, what's your favorite backcountry snack? Something that you eat when you're out there.
Okay, so Heather's Choice is a backcountry meal based out of
Anchorage.
Anchorage.
Yep.
She makes really cool little meals, but by far, my favorite thing that she makes is she has these things called packaroons.
Yep.
And they're these little like coconut things. Well, what I like to do is I like to take the bag and I open it up, and the amaretto ones are particularly delicious.
Yep.
And I'll like throw a splash of bourbon in there and let them soak in bourbon.
Whoa.
Oh, that sounds tasty.
It's pretty delicious.
Man, you've thought this out. You've got this figured out.
Yeah, I've eaten a lot of backcountry meals.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's the Weatherby Top 5. I appreciate you giving us your honest answers, and most of those each could have its own podcast. So
yeah,
we'll have to have you back on here pretty soon.
We usually do a fairly short podcast. This one's definitely going to be our longest one yet, but in the interest of making it any longer, before we land this plane, Thor, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about Alpacka?
Oh man, not specifically. I've mentioned this a couple times. We've had a super busy year, as I'm sure you guys experienced too. It's been such a bizarre year of ups and downs and roller coasters.
No question.
We've been really busy the last few months, which is great. But I will say that in March and April, when everything was really kind of fell off the cliff and we weren't sure what was going to go on, our sales had fallen. We started targeting hunters more over the last couple of years and producing product and marketing to them. And they really stepped up for us in March and April. We sold more boats to hunters in March and April who were just kind of saying, yeah, we hear you're slow. We're going to buy boats now. We know we don't need them right now, but we're going to need them in August.
That's awesome.
I got to say that was awesome.
Very cool.
That is cool.
Well, we owe you a big thanks. Like we've said on this before, we're going to have to get on a hunt together and share some time on the raft. But we appreciate everything you've done for us. Thanks for letting us feature the Alpacka Rafts on this trip, and it helped us out quite a bit.
They made the trip is so great.
Oh, God, I hate to add it at the end of this. One thing that was super funny was we showed up at this boat ramp with a bunch of backpacks packed for backpacking, and Hook was like, "You've got to be kidding. This is all you're bringing." And we were like, "This is all we're bringing."
Right.
And we were like, "We even have rafts and oars in these bags." And he's like, there's no chance you have there's no chance. Yeah. And he didn't say anything else.
No.
And it wasn't until after we were cutting up the meat at his place, he came up and he goes, "I thought you guys were just going to call me and tell me to come get you." Like, I literally didn't think you had rafts. Yeah. Like, I thought you were screwing around with me.
And then when he saw the rafts that we had, he's like, holy cow, those things are legit.
Yeah, now he wants to buy them.
In his head, he's like, if they've got rafts, he's picturing like some inflatable pool floaties or something.
Right.
Like
we're
gonna tube down the river.
Yeah, he thought we were just toast. And we showed up with all this meat and caribou, and he was like, this is crazy.
No kidding.
I meant to say that earlier. I forgot to, but
it was funny.
I guess that's how we'll land this podcast. If you're interested in a Dalton Highway caribou trip, do your research. It's doable. It's possible.
It's super doable. It's not crazy expensive.
And it's an adventure you're going to remember.
You can buy a Weatherby rifle. You can buy an Alpacka pack raft and still do so much, save money over what it would cost to do a similar hunt that's guided or outfitted. And I think your experience would be better.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
All right. Well, that is this episode of On Our Mark, the Weatherby podcast.
Thor, thanks for being on with us, man. That was great.
Thanks for having me. That was super fun.